What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the DJI Mavic 2 Pro with the new DJI FPV system. Here we have arguably the two most popular drones in the market right now. We have the new DJI FPV system and the DJI Mavic 2 Pro. The question is, which one's right for you? So the first thing we need to understand, guys, what exactly does FPV stand for? FPV basically stands for first person view. And when it comes to flying drones, you have basically two options. You can either fly a drone with a complete visual line of sight, such as the DJI Mavic 2 Pro, or when it comes to the new DJI FPV system, the way how you're able to see what the drone sees is through the DJI FPV goggles. And by utilizing this, you're literally able to have a live transmission feed of exactly what the drone is seeing through here. The first area comparison, guys, is going to be the flight time. The DJI Mavic 2 Pro comes in about 27 minutes of flight time. In actuality, I average around 24 minutes when I'm using it, whereas the DJI FPV system comes in around 15 minutes. Now, it is a bit of a reduction when it comes to flight time, but the one thing you want to keep in mind is that for an FPV system, 15 minutes of flight time is insane compared to other FPV drones where they average around between 7 to 10 minutes of total flight time. Now, when it comes to the max distance that these two drones are capable of, the DJI Mavic 2 comes in about 5 miles, whereas the FPV system comes at 6.2 miles. Now, when it comes to the actual weight of the two drones, the DJI FPV comes in at 795 grams, whereas the Mavic 2 Pro comes in at 905 grams. The one thing you want to keep in mind, guys, is that the DJI FPV system does not collapse whatsoever. The only thing that you can remove are the propellers, whereas the DJI Mavic 2 Pro, you can actually collapse the limbs, so it's a lot more easier to actually store and essentially travel around with, which could be a huge plus if you're trying to travel light. Now, when it comes to the ease of use, guys, between these two drones, hands down, the DJI Mavic 2 Pro is a lot easier to control. Both these drones have GPS capabilities. However, when it comes to flying this drone in manual mode, it takes a lot more skill and awareness of how to actually execute certain type of maneuvers, because the FPV system is a lot more capable in terms of being able to accomplish complex aerial maneuvers, whereas the DJI Mavic 2 Pro is pretty simple. You have basically your pitch, thrust, roll, and yaw movements, whereas with the DJI FPV system, you're able to combine all these movements in very, very complex ways at very high speeds. Now, when it comes to the level of risk of flying, guys, the DJI FPV system is a lot more dangerous to fly because, first and foremost, there's actually not that many sensors on here. There's only 4 sensors, and they being in the front and bottom, whereas the DJI Mavic 2 Pro has 10 sensors in total, which pretty much covers all components of the drone. So it's a lot safer to fly the DJI Mavic 2 Pro compared to the DJI FPV system. The next area of comparison, guys, we're going to look at the cameras between the two. So with the DJI Mavic 2 Pro, guys, the camera is a 1-inch Hasselblad sensor that's able to shoot 4K at 30 frames per second, up to 10-bit D-Log-M. The great thing about the DJI Mavic 2 Pro camera also is that it has an aperture range of 2.8 to 11 stops. This is great for different type of conditions where if you're in a situation where there's too much light coming in, having the ability to go higher in f-stop definitely helps you to reduce the amount of overexposure in your certain shots. The Mavic 2 Pro is also capable of taking raw photos in DNG format up to 5K in resolution. Now, when it comes to the DJI FPV system, the camera is able to shoot 4K at 60 frames per second. It has a 1/3.2-inch CMOS sensor, and it has a 2.8 fixed aperture. This is a bit of a downside, guys, because it's not as capable as a DJI Mavic 2 Pro when it comes to varying type of conditions when it comes to filming. The DJI FPV system is also capable of taking photos in JPEG format, but not RAW format, which is also another downside. But then again, you're not buying an FPV system to take photos with. So when it comes to the camera comparisons, I would definitely give the upper hand to the DJI Mavic 2 Pro. Both the cameras on these drones are stabilized. The one downside with the FPV system is that you'll find that in certain shots, the actual propellers will show up. This could be actually a bit of a good thing, as it kind of gives you a little bit more depth in terms of if you're flying near objects to kind of make sure that you're keeping a bit of a distance. But the downside with your propellers showing up in your shots using the FPV system is that you're gonna have to do a little bit of extra work in post-production to kind of really punch in to get rid of them. Both cameras are stabilized. However, the DJI Mavic 2 Pro has a 3-axis gimbal system. The FPV system only has a 1-axis vertical stabilization system. The downside of having a 1-axis stabilization system with the FPV is that it's a lot more jittery compared to the Mavic 2 Pro, and you'll find that in post-production, it's a lot harder to get stable footage even when you throw in warp stabilizer on it. So when it comes to comparing the cameras, guys, I would definitely give the upper hand to the DJI Mavic 2 Pro. Seeing that it has an aperture range between 2.8 to 11 stops, I was able to take raw photos up to 5K resolution in DNG format. Makes the camera on the DJI Mavic 2 Pro a lot more capable. And it also allows you to really adjust your camera settings for different type of weather environments as well if you're filming. The Mavic 2 Pro actually has 12 intelligent flight modes, and what this basically allows you to do is execute certain type of flight patterns and movements without you actually having to manually fly the actual drone. Whereas the DJI FPV system does not have any intelligent flight modes. You basically need to fly it manually at all times. Now, when it comes to comparing the price between the two drones, the DJI FPV system comes in at $12.99 USD, whereas the DJI Mavic 2 Pro comes in at $14.99 USD. So seeing that these two drones are very capable in their own right, the question is which one's right for you? And that really comes down to what exactly is your main priority. If you're more so an enthusiast enthusiast that likes to fly drones for a kind of more of a sport, the DJI FPV system is the drone that you want to go for. Whereas if you have more so importance on production, such as taking beautiful photos and cinematic videos, the DJI Mavic 2 Pro is a lot more capable on that aspect. That's pretty much it for today's video, guys. Hope you found it helpful in terms of determining which drone is right for you. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.